Hello, everybody. Yet another episode of NanaTalks Pod, and today I have Kimberly Gold joining me. So let's just jump right into the conversation. Community changed everything. I get it. I don't like, I do get it, but I bet that we are coming to this idea from different angles. So, what's your perspective of that? What do you mean when you're saying that?
Sure. To know me is to know that I will say community changes everything. And I know that and I believe that with every fiber of who I am because I have been a military brat, so to speak, since I was in the womb. And I have moved more times than I could count. And then I went on to spend the bulk of my career serving the military and veteran connected community. I've even deployed to Kuwait to support service members. And I have seen time and time again how community shows up for each other. And that is the difference between you're having a higher quality of life. So when I say community changes everything, that's what I mean. You can be in a not ideal location, but if you've got the right people around you, you'll want to stay there forever.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, since you mentioned that right, that you're an army spouse and you've been around forever, I know, and like one of the previous guests, Robin G. Grable, mentioned that, and a lot of folks are talking about that. That unfortunately, military spouses in the United States are facing one of the highest unemployment rates, and I'm wondering how does the community can help to solve that problem, because I'm getting tons of different information and I'm wondering how does it look, from the perspective of the one who is essentially living and breathing in this world.
I am living and breathing it and eating it and sleeping it, and I don't like it. I really don't. I have to be honest. I'm going to be vulnerable here and say that. I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to break some narratives, some false narratives. Military spouses are often seen as too transient to invest into. And the truth is, yes, we are transient. Uncle Sam has us moving with our service member every, few years, but that's also reflective of the current workforce. The current workforce is not a workforce that's staying with their employers for years and years and years. I think according to generational breakdowns, Gen Z, they're staying with organizations, I think, for 2 years. 2 years.
I
So,
believe even less than that. Yeah.
yes. So if you can make that investment into a air quote local person who's only going to stay with your organization for 2 years or less, you can make that investment into a military spouse who is likely going to be in your community for 2 to 4 years. And guess what? Because you've invested in those military spouses, you've just created a ongoing candidate pool because those military spouses are going to reinvest in that organization and they're going to say, hey, Kimberly, I was just hired here. I'm moving, so I'm having to leave, but you better go work for them too, because that's how supportive they are of our military and veteran connected life.
Right, that makes sense. But like you mentioned, that we need to break the narrative. What
Yes.
exactly do you feel that has to be changed over there? Because I'm sitting on a soapbox around the idea that since I'm mostly connected to the fintech, right, and the funding side of a business, I'm also saying that a lot of financial institution does not even recognize military spouses as the economically disadvantaged group. They're not ready. Same applies, as for the employers. For the financial institution, they are not ready to provide any type of funding to the military spouses because they are like, how are they going to pay back, and etc. Right? Even though military spouses in many cases are forced to start their own companies because they do not have that many other options, unfortunately, right? And I'm sitting on soapbox that, hey folks, this is a huge underserved target audience which can be super loyal, and like getting your idea about the community, right, which is are incredibly powerful and big community. And if you're overseeing these folks, jokes on you.
Jokes on them for real, because the military spouse population, I think the data says that we're at about 1 million of us, 1 million military spouses. That is a wonderful investment that some companies could make into military spouses. And we're not military spouses forever. Like some of us are military spouses for a season during that time where their service member is within the military. Some military spouses, let's just be honest here, don't always stay military spouses because divorce is a thing, separation is a thing. So that all to say that military spouses is a huge network of really strong, powerful people that are worthy of investment. And I just really think it's getting in front of these folks and letting them know that military spouses are some of the most educated in our demographics. They are some of the most loyal, some of the most adaptable, some of the most innovative folks. Why wouldn't you want those kind of people in your organization? Why wouldn't you want to invest in them?
Yeah, absolutely. But also, what I'm getting from a lot of, again, financial institutions, both, right, from the funding perspective and employers' perspective, that one of the biggest problems isn't necessarily the fact that, like, military spouse will move away with the family or whatever, but rather they have a lot of fears that military spouse will not be able to, juggling all the balls, support the family and build the career, etc., etc. I'm sure that's not true, but like, what's your take on that?
I think that you could throw a few more balls at military spouses and we would juggle them with ease. Um, Military spouses, I think that there's this narrative that we are these just disenfranchised, oh, poor me. And that's not the military spouses that I know. That's not the military spouses I know are some of the most powerful people I have ever met in my life, the most brave people. They hold things on their own while their service members are gone for months at a time. And I say this from personal experience. My service member just came home from a 9-month deployment, and I couldn't call him to to do XYZ. Like that wasn't an option. I had to handle it on my own. I had to handle the kid on my own. I had to handle, all these things on our own. And maintain a relationship at that, and maintain my sanity at that. So I think I really, really believe that so many narratives around who military spouses are need to be broken. Because if you want a powerful person as a part of your network, not even saying that, necessarily employed or funding them, but if you want a powerful person with such a diverse viewpoint because of all the different geographic locations they live, all the cultures they've been exposed to, get a few military spouses in your network. That'll change your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, a little bit, I know what you're talking about because I'm originally from Ukraine. I lived in Ukraine just like, 3 years ago. I I was in Kiev at the moment when the bombing was started. And I do have a lot of friends who are serving on the front line, and therefore I have a lot of friends who are military spouses. And I know exactly what you're talking about. The only difference would be that, like, their, active duty members are still on the front line. And sometimes when they're not calling you back, you simply don't know whether they are still alive. And I know for exactly how powerful military spouses can be and how hard it might be, especially if you have kids, if you have like one, two, three, four. No one really cares. The society by themselves doesn't care about you. You should figure that out on your own. And I do like I'm seeing that a lot. Getting back to United States, right? A lot of articles talking about mental health of the veterans. There are a lot of programs who are aiming to support veterans, but I haven't seen, to be totally honest with you, even one program helping military spouse with their mental health. I don't know if that's the case again for United States, and I really hope that maybe you can help me here. But I know for a fact that in Ukraine, military spouses in 80% of cases will be depressed, and they are not afraid or ashamed to talk about that because they have their reasons, right? It is very hard to to again go through that type of a life and be strong for years and years. So, like, how does everything look like from that perspective, from the perspective of the mental health and sanity of military spouses?
I want to acknowledge that we've come a long way with the military, with the mental health conversation. But that doesn't mean that we're done. We still have a long way to go. For me, I would love to see more data when it comes to mental health and military spouses. I have not been able to dig into any data that shows um, suicide or or self harm, self inflicted harm when it comes to military spouses and their dependents, or service members, spouses, and their dependents. And I'd really be interested to learn more about that family data. So, for those organizations that do research, this is my call out to you to fund organizations that do research for military with a focus on military families and mental health, particularly suicide and self harm. I think that's data that would be important to chart and to understand what the trends are so that we can get to solutions. Mental
I
health.
would even go a little bit, further away. I mean, not only thinking about self-inflicted harm or suicides, but also take a look from, like, from the perspective of impact on the family. If, let's assume, you are not suffering from suicidal thoughts or anything like that, but you know that your family member is struggling, your family will be impacted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in marriages, right? The beauty of marriages is that ideally when you cannot be strong, your partner is strong. And vice versa, right? So, for instance, here recently, I lost one of my favorite aunts. Like, this is
Sorry to hear that.
thank you for your condolences. I appreciate that. This is very raw and very fresh. And to be able to have a spouse who is in a mentally good place to be a support system for me as I grieve the loss of my aunt, that's a big deal. But that's not the reality for so many military connected families, for veteran connected families. Both people are struggling. And so, how do you have a strong relationship, a strong marriage, a strong career when both people are struggling? And these are the issues that we have to get to the root cause of. We need to open up more doors so that mental health is accessible. Um, right now it's really hard to get seen by most on-base providers, and those are barriers that we need to cut through, because mental health resources should be easily accessible. And when I say easily accessible, I want to be clear in that, yes, as military spouses we can call some hotlines, but when you've finally gotten to the point of bravery to acknowledge that something is broken inside of you mentally and you want that to be fixed, you're normally at a crisis mode. And it is not helpful to call a hotline and repeat your trauma over and over to various people on a pathway to find who the right person is for you. That is not helpful. There needs to be more direct care that is wraparound services, that is an easier lift for military families.
Absolutely. And I mean, how that is that even possible that you can work with your trauma or your problem? It doesn't necessarily has to be that huge, like, breakthrough or whatever with the different persons. It is very hard to open up even for one person, right? And people are very carefully, in many cases, are choosing their consultants or shrinks. And if you have to constantly just changing them, I cannot even imagine how you can make it happen. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I do remember that, like, a lot of counselors and shrinks from Israel and United States were providing hotlines for the folks from Ukraine. If you were, like, on the front line, you could call and share, and presumably they're gonna provide you help, but in many cases there were like 20 minutes of, oh sorry, something went wrong, broken line, and you're like, I'm crying here, I need help.
Right,
Come on, guys. And at the end of the day, you're like, well, okay, have coffee and whiskey and I'll figure that out.
right. And this is
And
what so many
that's it.
people self-medicate, self-treat, and our self-treatments aren't often helpful.
Well, yeah, especially taking into account everything was going on. I mean, with the price gouging, especially in the pharma, that's also my beloved soapbox. Sorry, not sorry. The latest Ozempic scandal, I mean, showed it all very, very clearly. And I'm not even jumping on the opioid crisis or whatever. Just the fact that the very basic, especially for this country, pharmaceutical, well, element, right, such as an Ozempic, being sold in this country for the price 10x comparing to any other country in the world, that can say you a lot about that something is very clearly broken. And when we are talking about mental health stuff and things, I can see that around that, like, oh, we can increase your score. And for me, it's like every time, I'm getting the call from the loan officers, presumably, right? who will help me increase my credit score. Every time I'm seeing something like that about, oh, we're gonna increase your score, like if you're a veteran and you're struggling with increasing your score, we're gonna help you. And like, what type of a shadowy scheme you're trying to imply over here, or like trying to get me onto? So again, I don't know. I haven't been in your shoes, but like if you were be the one who would be able to move the needle, what should be the very first steps?
I would, I mean, money, right? Money. We can't ignore that programs cost money, right? But I do think that there are ways that we can be fiscally conservative, because we should all be good stewards of our taxpayers' dollars, and we should all be stewards, incredible stewards of our government budget, right? Um, I think there are creative ways that we could allocate for different types of positions. Specifically, I think that we need resource navigators, because right now I feel like we are in an era where we have so many resources, but we don't know how to navigate them. And again, when a lot of people, they come for help when it is a crisis. And it is hard to logically process when you are in crisis. So that said, I really think the thing that we should be investing in are resource navigators, hyper local resource navigators who can work in those positions for a long time, so that they have the the ability to gather all this information, of national, state, and local resources, so that they can, though that team of resource navigators can be the person that intakes somebody like me who's calling and says, this is what I'm struggling with, and this is how I need help. And instead of sending me to 20 different people, this person is doing the intake, and this person is doing very direct, warm handoffs that are curated in a way that only community can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to the misconceptions, because well, I'm more from the typical civilian world, but it really seems to me that sometimes, the world of the veterans and military spouses, the folks who are actively like serving, right? It sometimes it feels like we're using English, you're using Mandarin. We're not hearing each other at all. So what are the biggest misconception, in your opinion, who are, especially we are civilians, we're ignorant about, we do not understand?
One, I think that folks have I love that folks glamorize the military, because the military is, an honorable career. And it's a career that requires great sacrifice, not just from the service member, but from the families, from the kids to the spouses. So I really, really appreciate that so many people have, hold the military in such high regard. But I think what comes with that is this illusion of financial security that is not real. with service members make a large range of money, right? And you've got folks who have been in for 20 years and you've got folks who have been in for 2 months. The pay range is vast. And as such, financial insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity, this is a real thing. Just because we are military affiliated does not mean that we have a silver spoon. And I think that a lot of folks think that military folks are a lot more well off than we really are. In fact, because of our frequent relocations, most of us are struggling more than average Americans.
I mean, I tend to believe that maybe one of the reasons would be the fact that you can hear a lot about the powerful military lobby, powerful government contracting, about the fact that 50% of the government budget being spent on the government related contracts and 50% out of the budget of such a huge country as United States. That's kind of a lot. And you're assuming, right, that everybody essentially has access to those money. And it is very weird and honestly a little bit even creepy to see on one hand these donations and funds for helping homeless veterans, and on the other hand to hear that half of the budget of the country being spent on the government contracting. I'm really curious like how this can be aligned and what is going on like on fields if you're trying to break into the government contracting. Is it really that easy? I don't believe so.
Government contracting is not that easy. uh,
Do you want to go a little bit deeper? We can just leave
it
it like that.
there is a whole series and occupation within the government that does contracting. I think the things that I could say would not even touch the surface of government contracting. Um, Government contracting can be seen as very lucrative for some folks, and yes, absolutely. But it costs money to be the world's strongest military superpower. And government contracting is a way that we actually save money in being the world's strongest military superpower. But it is a huge machine that I could not speak expertly on at all. I know that it requires, if anybody needs a resource navigator, you need a resource navigator to get through government contracting.
I believe that it has to be like something like a Waze, right? So 3 steps ahead, then turn right. You're gonna see a door. Knock 3 times and like start to pray right away that maybe the door is going to be open. Right, that no one can say for sure, but yeah, there is that this idea, right, that like, oh, that's not a big deal. After my transition, I mean, from the military to civilian life, I'll be easily be able to break into the government contracting, and all the sacrifices will be paid off as soon as I will get my first government contract. And a lot of folks, that's the pure statistic, will try to break into the or something connected to the cybersecurity, tech related, or whatever, simply because their jobs used to be connected to the specific spheres, or into logistic. And both of these spaces are super crowded.
Mhm, mhm.
So it doesn't seem and feels like that's the way how you will be able to provide to your family and like become a millionaire, especially taking into account that unfortunately, or like I don't even know if, well, that's just the case, that's the real life. Even after you will get your certification that you are veteran, I mean, and your company is veteran owned or disabled veteran owned, or I don't know, whatever, right, that not necessarily will open, well, okay, it will open the door, but it is 100% not a guarantee that you will be able to secure any of the contract,
Right,
because there are a line of other veterans
right,
exactly the
right.
same as you are, right?
And I think, and you know better than most people, in order to be successful in business, in order to be successful in life, you have to be hungry and you have to keep pushing, right? And for those veterans and military connected folks who aspire to be business owners or already are business owners, I cannot brag enough about the Small Business Administration, the Veterans Business Outreach Centers that are across the nation. Most of the time, those resources are absolutely free. Use those resources because they can be your resource navigators. But the business world, wanting to have a successful business is not a world where somebody is going to hold your hand. It is not. You have to be hungry. You have to want it more than anything and anyone else. And only then will doors start to open for you and people start to show up and help you out. But you have to want it and people have to see that hunger.
Yeah, absolutely. I do remember when I just first came into the country, everybody was like, pushing me, oh, just go and apply. You're like female founder and especially in a fintech, there's, this is the whole world of like, well, males, the old typical, and by the way, this is also misconception. I can say that for sure, but there is this idea, this the fintech or banking world or financial institution world is fulfilled with the old white folks, right, who knows better. That's not necessarily true, but what I figure out that for myself, I don't want to apply or identify myself solely as the female founder, because I am much more than that. I'm trying to move the needle and help the community I truly believe in. I know exactly what I'm talking about, and I know what like veterans, military spouses are going through. I've seen a lot of struggles you're facing with. I know what does it mean to be forced to move around, even though in my case the reasoning behind were slightly different, but still you're losing your roots, you're losing everything you've built within years. Doesn't really matter whether that was a year or two or three, right? You created your tiny community, and community changes everything, and I'm here with you, right? You've created your world, your bubble, and now you just have to live it all and move. And this is, well, it's not impossible, but that's unpleasant experience to say at least,
It
right? And
is.
yeah, and having that experience, or you become stronger. And that's yet another reason why I tend to believe that military spouses are incredible. Those who survive through couple deployments, like, 5 times someone, my God, they're Terminators.
That's a that's such a great word. And I love that you say that you don't want to be defined by being a female funder, because I think that we as people have this mechanism where we are trying to always put somebody in a box. And I feel so strongly against that, because we're not meant to be put in boxes. We're meant to be an intersection of the many things that we identify with. For me, I identify, and this is just like surface level identification. I identify with being Black. I identify with being Korean. I identify with having immigrant parents. I identify with being military connected. That's just very surface level. There's so much depth to who we are as people that we have got to stop identifying people, categorizing people off of very surface level things, because the surface level things, they contribute to who we are, but it is the sum of our lived experiences that make us who we really are. So we have to go
Exactly.
deeper.
I just thought when you were like, you were counting and like I identify as yada yada yada. It's like you shared all the labels, but I still don't know who you are. Like, what do you like? Which books do you like? Movies? What are you crying about? What are you happy like about, right? I mean, the sentence that you've shared before, that you were mourning because of your like the loss of your auntie, means much more than all of these labels, about who you are, what you are going through
Mhm.
right now.
And
So,
and I would love to unpack that a little bit, because my aunt in Korean, for it's nuance, but essentially a word that's commonly used for aunt in Korean is emo. So I don't honestly call her aunt, I call her emo. And and truthfully, she's not my biological aunt. You know, I came to America as an American citizen, born overseas when I was a toddler, and my family created a community. And they created this community, and part of that community was this emo. She is one of my first unbiological emos, and I know that all around America, regardless of what your background is, we all have family that we chose, and she is the family that chose me, and I'm the family that chose her, and we did that over and over and over again, despite not having the technology that we have today. She has been in my life since I was 4 years old. So I am somebody who believes that family can be chosen, and family is not always by birth and by marriage. Or adoption or whatever other legal means of family. Family is who you choose. And that's something that I feel very strongly about. And that's why I'm mourning the loss of my emo. But also in that mourning, I want to share that I want to share with you that she just died last night. This is very fresh.
Oh my God.
And I had considered canceling today's podcast because it is heavy for me.
Of
But
course.
I also believe that life is for the living, and that our ancestors want us to live and they want us to honor them. And the way that we honor them is by living a life that honors them and by living life. I believe that sometimes when we talk about ancestors, we think of ancestors as far off generations, and that's not true. Many of us have living ancestors. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in being dutiful descendants that we forget that we're supposed to become strong ancestors as well. So that's why I decided today to continue to move forward, and make space for my grief, but make space for life as well.
Oh my God. Terminator. I like literally. I just. I mean, I don't know. I believe that I've never shared on social media or whatever. Like, what are the reasoning behind why I called my company Nana Fund? Why Nana? And a lot of folks were asking me about that, and they're assuming whatever reasons. But to be totally honest, the major reason why Nana, because of my grandma, my Nana. And for me, I mean, she was my blood Nana, but oh my God, I've chosen her, she's chosen me. And I love her deeply. She's a very poor woman from the tiny city closer to village-ish, type of location. But she was wise, and she was the very first one who told me and who taught me how to deal with money, um, how to be careful, and how to be respectful to different people, how to not try to labelize anyone and everyone. But what was the most important lesson was the fact that she was the first one who told me that you're the one who decide deliberately what's going to happen with you. You cannot ever say something like, oh, you offended me. No, no one can offend you. You deliberately can choose, allow them to offend you. And same applies to everything. If you've chosen to fight, if you've chosen to become entrepreneur, if you've chosen your way of life, deal with that. You cannot say that, oh, they haven't provided me enough. Even though if that's the truth, you presumably knew what you were signed for. And if that's the life you've chosen, you need to find that strength to make that happen.
Your Nana sounds amazing, and she sounds a lot like my emo. She was also a woman who taught me about money. That was her career, actually. She was a financial readiness. She was in the Army's financial readiness program, And
So literally from the 4 years old, you were into this. Like when you were like, when you brought that, like, oh, I was there from the very beginning. I was like, yeah, like, okay, from 20, but no, literally from the 4 years old.
and and she was also a military spouse and a Korean immigrant, and she forged her path and she made a way. So thank you for honoring my emo, and thank you for giving me the space to do so.
Of course. Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate that. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of inner strength to talk about things which are very fresh and they're painful. I I really hope that you will get all the support and space to mourn, to celebrate, to yeah, to go through all the best memories. I'm keep thinking about everything we went through, all the wise ideas she shared with me, and I have to admit that from times to times I'm just catching this idea that, oh my god, that's what she were talking about. That, oh, okay, yeah, she were right. I had no the fuck idea what she was talking about back years ago, but oh, okay, now I got it. Now I do understand that. And yeah, I mean, that's how we are living our life, right? The very important, I'd say, thing: keep listening, right, to everybody,
That part.
and do not assume that you know a shit, because most probably you don't.
That part. And I really live by the Socratic philosophy of the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing. And with my emo and so many of my elders, I turned 40 this year, and I think, gosh, if I had just listened to them, if I had just listened to them, if I had
I know, right? They told me so. They told me so like years ago. But you were like, oh, like after you already have your bruisers, after you already have your cuts, you're like, shit, I could avoid that.
right, right, you could avoid a lot of pain points if you just listen to your elders and learn from their lessons. Today, I had the honor of meeting a retired NFL player. His name is Wade Manning, and he played back in the day, like in the 80s or so. And I asked him, I said, what is something that the young generation of professional athletes can learn from your generation? And do you know what he said? He said, be better with money. He said, be better with money and be better to your body. And overwhelmingly, when I speak to my elders, that is the theme that I hear is be better with your money, be better with your body, and be better with your time.
Yeah. Be better with your money. God. Yeah. That's one of the ideas. You're absolutely right there. No. Yeah. And again, getting back, to the misconceptions and misleading ideas, right? I know that every movement is a transition, right? And it is very hard and complex, but moving from the military life to the back to the civilian life, sometimes it's even harder for both, right? I also like hearing a lot from the folks from the veteran connected community that a lot of veterans are facing issues with the essentially losing their personalities. They don't know where to go, they don't know what to do, they cannot find the place in the new world for themselves. And their perspective I do understand more or less, but I've never heard the perspective of the military spouses.
I think that something that is very common in our military and veteran connected community, a very common value is commitment and loyalty. Um, we we as spouses don't pledge to protect and defend the Constitution. Um, we we watch as our service members do that. There is a residual effect to seeing service members be so dedicated to a mission, to be so dedicated to our country. And I think that that impacts us so that commitment and loyalty become very strong core values for many of us. That said, um, something too much of anything is a bad thing, right? And
Absolutely.
I think when you transition to civilian life, um, you you have this commitment and loyalty. So it can be very hard to commit to something different because you have this life that you built, you have this community that you built that is very military and veteran centric, and now you are forced to do something different. If I could tell any military veteran connected person, whether that's somebody who has served or somebody who is a spouse or somebody who is a child, when they depart that military and veteran connected community, that real core community, it would be to say yes, because you have been limited in some ways and for the right reasons, because with things being limited you can focus on mission, but now you have a greater mission, and that is your life's purpose and what you need to do and what you need to pursue. So this time, say yes. If something is moderately interesting to you, say yes, and do not feel the pressure to commit to that, because you can say yes and you can find out, you know what, fishing is not for me and I'm not going to do it anymore. I did it for 2 weeks and I realized I don't like it. It looked kind of cool when
It
I
took you 2 weeks to realize that you hate fishing? What the hell you done over there?
I actually like fishing.
Maybe you're fishing, I don't know, sharks or whatever. I do not understand this whole concept of just staying quietly, preferably not moving for hours. Like, the hell? No.
Right, I think there's peace and there's therapy and looking at a body of water and being still, especially when I personally have a very busy life. So that is enticing to me. But I really think that folks should say yes, be brave and be courageous and say yes to things that interest you, because you know we have these ideas that, oh, if we get to point B, we made it. But that's not how life works. Point B gets you to C, and C gets you to D, and D gets you to E. And you find out that, oh my God, I love salsa dancing, but you started off line dancing, right? So you have to give yourself the grace to explore, and you explore by saying yes, and do it scared. Just do it scared. Just do it courageously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that do not try to build your life solely based on the, I don't know, expectations of others or understanding which coming from, again, from the society, typical social media, you name it, right?
Right.
uh how they are assuming or what they are dictating what the success means.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you're not fulfilling your internal void, and by the way, this void cannot be fulfilled with money. Money is great. You have to be smart with them, better with them, but they cannot fulfill the true need. They can help you with that, but they cannot fulfill it. Do not only center everything in your life around this need, no matter how hard it can be. And I know that sometimes the pressure you can feel, right? That you have to provide, you have to put food, right, on the table. You have to put the essentially the roof above the heads of your family. And sometimes it can be so overwhelming that you easily can forget. It can slip off your plate.
Right.
The idea of who I am, what do I want to do. So I would encourage everybody starts from there. What do I want to do? Just today, the gentlemen I'm talking with at the round table, they are working also with the veterans, and one of them were sharing the story of mm, this former, I believe, Marine who came to Mark, that's the consultant, and told or asked, like, so here's the thing. what I was doing for the past 15 years, I was jumping off the helicopter. I have like, I'm totally not afraid of height, and I'm okay to do anything. So, what can I do what nobody else wants to do because they're so scared of height? And I love it. Like, I love the height. So, what can I do? And he started to put the Christmas decorations on the houses. And now he's like on his road to the first 500,000 in revenue, only 2 years in business,
That's
right?
incredible.
And you know how he started? Like how he's essentially kicked off his business. He went to Staples, he printed out flyers. Hello, my name is I do not afraid of height because I've served 15 years. I'd be happy to help you. If you're afraid of height, you need to clean your roof, you need to put your decorations, just give me a call.
I love that.
And he walked through the whole neighborhood and he left those flyers. That's it. And now he's hiring the 15th folk from his, formation because none of them are afraid of height,
I love
right?
that. And that gentleman that you speak about, he did something that so many people in business struggle to do, and that is, or the question that they struggle to answer, what problem do you solve? And he made it very clear.
Yeah. And he loved it. He has experience in it, like if you can say so, but that doesn't really matter, right? He asked very, I don't know, proper and powerful, correct question, right? What can I do what nobody else wants to do
Mhm.
because they're afraid? This is it. That's the need, opportunity, and the niche all in once.
Right, right. That's incredible. And I want more of our veterans, or even those active duty, and our military spouses and our military kids for that matter, to lean into that, because the future looks so different, and I hope that more people have businesses, thriving businesses, and they give themselves the grace to just to learn and keep learning.
Absolutely. What I can tell you for sure to wrap up, and to getting back to our beloved Nana and Ema, I do remember being a little girl on the post-Soviet Union country, looking essentially, behind the like the bars and everything, like, oh my God, over there in United States, you know what they can do? They can start their own business. That's okay. They can do that. And yeah, they will not be like, killed by all the tax inspectors who will come to their house and say, you know what, you're gonna need to pay us because like Christmas time, and you're gonna need to put the money out of your family, put it into envelope and give it to them, knowing that this money will never ever be taxed or whatever, right? It's just a bargain. But that's the only way how you could have a business back in Ukraine years and years ago. And this whole idea that you can start your business and being supported by government, for me that was like absolutely insane. So here's my reminder, like, to these folks who are, you know, not sure whether they can or cannot or whatever. Folks, you have opportunity and you have support. The hell you want more?
It's true. It's true. America is not a perfect country, and it will never be a perfect country. And there is no perfect country in this entire globe. But America is still a land of opportunity, and it is still a land of possibility. And I hope that people see that. With our very divided political climate, I think it's very easy to get wrapped up into what's wrong with us, but there is so much that is right with us. And that's what we need to focus on, because what we focus on becomes fact.
Exactly. And that's exactly what like my nana told me. You know what? If at any moment of a time it just happened to be that you're going to find yourself in the United States, don't you dare to go and start like scrubbing the toilets or whatever. You will go there and you're going to build business. You will help people and you're going to live your life. And she was absolutely right. And I have incredible amount of gratitude to my Nana. And that's why. That's why my first company, which I'm building in the United States, called Nana Fund. Because I wanted to build that, I wanted to help, and I wanted to help exactly to the community I've chosen. Because you're absolutely right. Family is not by blood, family is by, who we choose to serve, to love. I've chosen to serve and love veterans and military spouses, and I'm not ready to split them. I'm not ready to say that I'm serving only veterans because this is more glamorous. I do not fucking care. I'm serving to those who I've chosen. That's it.
Well, thank you for serving our military and veteran connected community. And thank you for placing emphasis on military spouses and military families. That's not always the case. So, from the bottom of my heart, as a military spouse, as a grown up military kid, I really thank you for seeing us and choosing us.
You're Terminators. Come on. Come on. I'm sure that my first employee gonna be military spouse, and I know for a fact that that's gonna be the best choice I will ever make in my life, because I'm sure that I'll be able to rely on that person.
That's right.
100%.
Military spouses are very hireable. Going back to the beginning of the conversation, we are hireable, we are educated, we are loyal, we are committed, and we will help you build a pipeline of employees for your organization. And you don't even have to hire us as employees. You can hire us as 1099 contractors, because most of us don't need the healthcare and all that stuff, but still give us PTO, because family is important and we need to balance our life.
Exactly. And let me also remind you one more thing. This is the era of AI. How the hell the location matters? You are aware of the fact that we can communicate over Zoom. Haven't you also have COVID? Like, have you operated all this time? There is not that much of our industries who are hardly required to be on offices.
Right.
Like, don't be so scared. Just give a trust to the folks who you're hiring. You are aware that they are adult, loyal, and capable. And I'm not talking here like solely about military spouses, but like when we were talking about Terminators. Come on. Like, how on earth,
Let's
right?
move to the future with our military and veteran connected communities, especially those spouses.
Hey to that. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kimberly. And yeah, thank you for sharing my condolences from the bottom of my heart. It's very, very hard to lose those who loved us and whom we loved from the bottom of our heart, but I mean, we have them.
We do.
We have them,
They,
and
they live within us as long as we honor them.
exactly. You have those memories, and I'm incredibly happy that you had your Ima in your life, and she shared with you all her knowledge or her wisdom. And well, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you for having me.